I worked the night booth at a downtown parking garage for about 3 years. Overnight shift, 10 at night to 6 in the morning. It's a job made almost entirely of watching. There's a little booth at the exit, and behind me, a wall of monitors. 6 screens, and I could cycle each one through every camera in the structure. 7 levels, stairwells, elevators, every corner. On a slow night, and they were all slow, watching those screens was the entire job. You'd think an empty parking garage at 3 in the morning would be the safest place in the world. Nobody there. But empty is exactly the problem. Because when something does move on those screens, there's no crowd to hide it, no noise to explain it away. It's just you and the thing that shouldn't be moving, and a lot of concrete between you. Most nights, nothing. A late worker coming for their car, a couple cutting through. The occasional guy sleeping one off in his back seat, which I'd let go if he wasn't bothering anyone. This particular night, around 2, I noticed a car on level 3 that I didn't remember coming in. That happens. I don't clock every vehicle. But this one caught my eye because its lights were on. Parked, engine presumably off, but headlights burning, pointed at the concrete wall. I watched it on the monitor for a while. Nobody in it that I could see. I figured somebody forgot their lights and made a note to check it on my next walk. About 20 minutes later, I cycled back to that camera, and there was a man standing in front of the car. Just standing. In the beam of his own headlights, facing the wall, his back to the camera. Not doing anything. Not looking for something, not on his phone. Standing in the light, facing a blank concrete wall, motionless. I watched him for a couple of minutes, and he didn't move, and I'll be honest, it rattled me more than if he'd been doing something obviously wrong. There's a particular wrongness to a person being perfectly still in a place where there's no reason to be still. I told myself he was drunk, tired, having a bad night. People are strange at 2 a.m. Then he turned around and looked at the camera. Not glanced, turned deliberately and faced it, and looked up into it. And I had this cold moment of understanding that he knew exactly where every camera was. And then he lifted his hand and pointed at it, at the camera, at me, and held it there. And then he pointed at the next camera over, the one covering the ramp, and the next, the one by the elevator, one after another. He was showing me that he knew where all of them were, and where the gaps were. I picked up the phone to call it in, and while I was dialing, he walked out of frame, toward the stairwell, the one that comes down level by level and lets out about 30 feet from my booth. Now, the booth locks. I want to be clear about that. I locked it. But a parking booth is glass on 3 sides, and it is not built to keep a determined person out. It's built to keep you dry and let you make change. And I sat in my lit-up glass box at the bottom of that stairwell, and I watched the stairwell camera, and I waited to see him come down. He didn't come down. I watched that stairwell for 10 minutes, every level. He never appeared on any of the cameras inside it, which should have been a relief, except it meant I didn't know where he was. A man had walked into a stairwell on level 3 and simply not come out of it on any screen I had. 7 levels of cameras, and he was on none of them. I called the police non-emergency line and, feeling stupid, explained that a man was behaving strangely in the garage. They said they'd send someone by. And I sat in my glass booth and I cycled through every camera I had, over and over, looking for him. And on my 4th or 5th pass, I found him. He was on level 1, the level I was on. Standing at the far end, maybe 200 feet from my booth, in the dark between 2 pillars where the lights are bad. facing me, just far enough that the camera caught him as a shape, a pale smudge of a face and no more. He stood there for the rest of my shift. 2 hours. I'd cycle away to the other cameras and cycle back, and he'd be there in the same spot, facing the booth. Not approaching, not leaving, just watching the lit-up glass box with the person inside it. When the police finally rolled through around 4:30, their headlights swept that end of level 1, and there was nobody there. They walked the whole structure with me, every level, every stairwell. The car with the headlights was gone too. I never saw it leave on any camera. They found nothing, and they were kind about it. And one of them said the thing that people say, which is that the cameras can play tricks, that a tired man on a night shift sees things. Maybe. But I saved the footage before I left, all of it, and I've watched it since, stone cold sober in the daylight, and it's all there. The man in the headlights, the pointing at each camera, and 2 straight hours of him standing at the dark end of level 1, facing my booth. I quit within the month. And here's the detail that made me quit. The one I didn't tell the police because I only worked it out later, at home, watching the footage frame by frame. When he pointed at all the cameras that first time, showing me he knew where they were, he missed one. There's a camera above the booth itself, small, easy to overlook, that points down at the exit lane. He never pointed at that one. At the time, I thought he'd simply missed it, but on that camera, the one he didn't know about, the one pointed down at my own booth, there's footage from near the end of my shift, from while I was watching him stand at the dark end of level 1. And in it, for about 4 seconds, someone walks past the back of my booth. Close, right behind the glass, while the man I was watching stood 200 feet away in full view, keeping my eyes exactly where he wanted them. There were 2 of them the whole time, and only one of them wanted to be seen. My uncle owns a self-storage facility, and for about a year in my early 20s, I ran the front office and did the overnight monitoring from a back room. It's a good job for a quiet person. During the day, you check people in, hand out gate codes. At night, you sit in a small office with a bank of monitors and you watch a few hundred locked metal doors do absolutely nothing. That's the thing about a storage facility. It's rows and rows of other people's private things behind roll-up doors, and it's dead silent. And at night, it is one of the emptiest places you will ever be. The cameras cover the gate, the main drive, and each row of units. Motion lights click on when a car comes through, and otherwise the whole place sits dark and still. The gate needs a code. Every entry is logged. Code, time, in and out. That log matters, so remember it. There was a unit, 114, down the end of a middle row that started bothering me about 2 months in. It bothered me because of the light. At night, sometimes, there'd be a thin line of light under the door of 114. Just a sliver along the bottom, the way you'd see light under a door in a house. Storage units don't have power. There are no outlets in them, no lights inside. The rows are lit by the overheads on the ceiling of the building. So there was no good reason for light to be coming from inside a sealed unit at 2 in the morning. The first time, I convinced myself it was a reflection, the overhead lights bouncing off something. But it only ever happened at 114, and it only ever happened deep in the night. And one time, I watched on the monitor as that sliver of light under the door went dark. Not flickered, went out. Like someone inside had switched off a lamp. I checked the gate log obsessively after that. Whose unit was it? The record said 114 had been rented 8 months earlier, paid a year up front in cash. And here's the part that put a stone in my stomach. In 8 months, the gate log showed that unit's code had never been used. Not once. Nobody had driven through that gate to access 114. Ever. So light was coming from a unit that, according to every record we had, no one had entered in 8 months. I told my uncle. He's a practical man, and he did the practical thing. He said we'd cut the lock and check it in daylight with another guy there, which is the protocol when a unit seems abandoned or wrong. We scheduled it for a Saturday morning. But this is a story about cameras, and the camera is what I still can't explain. 3 nights before that Saturday, I was watching the monitors around 3 a.m., and the motion light in that row clicked on. Something had moved. I cycled to the camera for that row, and I watched the door of Unit 114 roll up from the inside. Nobody had come through the gate. The log was empty for that night. I checked it while I was watching, my hands not quite steady. But the door of 114 rolled up from the inside about halfway, and it stayed there. And out of that half-open door into the row stepped a man. I couldn't see him well. The row cameras are decent, but he kept low, moved along the wall where the light was worst. He walked down the row, unhurried, and at the end of it he stopped and he looked up, directly at the camera, and he did the smallest thing. He waved. A little wave, 2 fingers, almost friendly. And then he walked back to 114, ducked under the half-open door, and pulled it down behind him from the inside. And the sliver of light appeared under the door, and then, a minute later, went dark. I called my uncle at 3 a.m. He called the police. And when they cut the lock on Unit 114 that same night, not Saturday, that night, it was empty. Not empty like nobody was here. Empty like somebody had lived there and cleared out in a hurry. There was a camp cot, a pile of blankets, empty food cans stacked neatly in a corner, a bucket I won't describe further, and taped to the inside of the roll-up door at eye level, facing out, facing the row, facing the camera, a piece of paper. On it, in careful handwriting, were times. Dates and times, a long list of them, going back months. And it took the officer a minute, and then it took me a lot longer to accept, but we worked out what the list was. They were my shift changes. The times I arrived, the times I left, the times in the small hours when I'd leave the monitor room to do my one walking round of the property. Someone had been living in Unit 114 for months, and they had spent those months learning me. When I watched, when I walked, when the office was empty. Learning the rhythm of the one person who could see the cameras. How he got in and out past a gate that logged every entry they never figured out. How he had light with no power nobody could say. He was never caught. But I think about that little wave for the camera. 2 fingers, almost friendly. He didn't wave because he'd been caught. He waved because he was leaving, and he wanted me to know that he'd always known I was there, watching my little screens, thinking I was the one doing the watching. I'd been monitoring that facility for months. He'd been monitoring me right back. From inside one of the doors I was watching. There's a 24-hour laundromat near where I used to live, and because I worked odd hours, I'd end up there at strange times, 1, 2 in the morning, when it was just me and the hum of the machines and the flat white light that places like that always have. It's not a scary place. That's almost the point of this. It's bright, it's public. There's a camera in the corner. There's a phone number for the owner taped to the wall. It's about as safe as a room gets. The camera in the corner had a little screen behind the counter, one of those setups where the live feed plays on a small monitor so customers can see they're being recorded, a deterrent. I'd glance at it sometimes, see myself sitting there, tiny and grainy, waiting on a dryer. You get used to seeing yourself on it. One night, maybe 1:30 in the morning, place empty except for me, I was sitting on the bench by the folding table and I glanced up at that little monitor. And I saw myself on the bench the way I expected. And I saw the row of machines. And in the far corner of the frame, near the back where the utility door is, I saw a man standing. I want to describe this carefully. I looked at the monitor and I saw him on it. And then I looked up, directly at the actual corner of the actual room where he should have been standing. And there was no one there. The corner was empty. I could see the whole room. I was the only person in it. But on the monitor, on the live feed of that same room, there was a man standing in the back corner by the utility door. I looked back and forth. Room, empty. Monitor, man in the corner. Room, empty. Monitor, still there. And on the screen, as I watched, the man on the monitor turned his head and looked at me. At the me on the bench. He was looking at where I was sitting. Now, I've had a long time to think about this, and I know what the rational answer is, and I'll give it to you because I want to be fair. The likeliest explanation is that the camera was faulty, or looped, or showing an old recording, that what I saw was footage from some other night, some real person who'd stood in that corner at some point, played back over the live view by a glitch. That's probably it. I've told myself that's it for years. But here's what that explanation has to survive. I got up. I did the stupid thing, the thing you yell at people in movies for doing. I walked toward the back corner, toward the utility door, because some part of me had to know. And as I walked across the room, I kept glancing at the monitor. And on the monitor, the man in the corner didn't move as I approached the empty corner in real life. He just stood there on the screen, watching the me on the bench, even though I was no longer on the bench. I was walking. The real me was crossing the room. The me on the monitor was still sitting down. The feed wasn't showing the room. It was showing a version of the room where I was still on the bench, and a man was in the corner, watching me not notice him. I stopped in the middle of that laundromat, and I made myself look one more time back and forth. The real corner? Empty. The monitor? The man was gone now. Just an empty corner and the empty bench, and no me in the frame at all, because the feed had apparently caught up to a room I was standing in the middle of. I left my clothes, wet in the machine. I walked out and I did not go back to that laundromat, not once, not ever, not even in daylight to get my stuff. I bought new clothes. That's not an exaggeration. I genuinely wrote off a load of laundry rather than return. I called the owner the next day, the number on the wall, and I tried to explain it without sounding insane, and I asked if the camera system had any problems, if it recorded, if I could see the footage from the night before. And he was quiet for a second, and then he said the thing that ended it for me. He said the camera in that laundromat hadn't recorded anything in years. It was a dummy. The little monitor behind the counter showed a live feed and nothing else. No hard drive, no storage, nothing saved, ever. Just a camera pointed at the room, throwing the picture onto that one screen in real time, and then letting it vanish. Which means there was no old footage to glitch, no recording to loop. The monitor could only ever show one thing, the room, exactly as it was, right now, live. So when I looked at that screen and saw myself sitting on a bench I was no longer sitting on, and a man in a corner where no man stood, that was the room, right now, live. I just don't know whose right now I was looking at, or which version of that room the camera was really pointed at. I still don't do laundry after dark, and I never, ever look at those little customer monitors anymore, the ones that show you the room you're already standing in, because now I always wonder if they're showing me the same room I think I'm in.